Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at something, well, pretty fascinating. It's a collection of notes, really personal reflections from someone, and they touch on some really unconventional ideas. Consciousness, life before birth, the structure of the self, deep stuff.
Definitely not your everyday conversation topics. It sounds like it comes from a very personal place, a lifetime of thinking about this.
Exactly. And we got a bit of context, too. The person sharing this, they're literally in the middle of packing boxes, moving house. Yeah, so they recorded this on May 28th, 2025, kind of squeezed it in. They even joked it was inspired by a chat with someone named Heidi, calling it I Blame Heidi.
Right. A bit of levity before diving deep.
Totally. And get this, right before hitting record, apparently some low-flying fighter jets roared over, afterburners blazing, shook the whole house. Dogs going wild.
Wow, that's quite a scene setter. Adds a layer of immediate, intense reality.
Doesn't it? So our mission today is to sort of unpack the unique insights in this material. We'll explore these ideas about pre-birth memories.
Which is already a pretty wild starting point.
Right. And then this concept of the human being being bigger than just the physical body and what that might mean for, why we experience the things we do.
So it's about approaching this with curiosity, yeah. Being open to some potentially mind-bending ideas.
Definitely. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with the idea that really sparked this whole thing, the one shared with Heidi. The core claim is, well, that their earliest memories connected to their current body actually happened before they were physically in it.
Yeah, that's the kicker. And they acknowledge this isn't something you hear about in the normie world, as they put it.
Right. Yeah.
But it's something they've apparently come across in more, let's say, esoteric circles, like Aikido dojos, Zen meditation centers, places where people might explore consciousness more deeply.
And they've been thinking about this for over 70 years.
70 years, yeah. Mulling over this pre-birth awareness. It's quite something.
And there's that specific observation they made.
Oh, right. That in all that time, they've only ever met men who reported having similar pre-birth memories.
Which is interesting, a curious detail for sure.
Definitely. But for the source, this wasn't some random fluke. They seem to feel that because it happened, it was meant to happen, that it's somehow allowed within the larger system of things, maybe even connected to spiritual progress across lifetimes.
So not an error, but maybe a signal, a sign of something.
Potentially, yeah. That's the implication, like a marker on a longer journey.
So if there's memory from before the body,
yeah.
What was that state actually like? Did they describe it?
They did. The key thing seems to be pure awareness. Thinking was happening, definitely. But, and this is fascinating, there were no words.
No words. How does that work?
Hard to imagine, isn't it? They said everything was just perfectly sensible, understood directly without needing language, like a pure concept.
Wow. Okay. And the feeling, was it scary, confusing?
Not at all, apparently. No anxiety, no fear. Quite the opposite, in fact. They described a feeling of excitement, anticipation.
Anticipation for what was coming, presumably.
Seems like it. A kind of mental eagerness. And physically, well, there was no physical body, right? So no hot or cold, no normal sense of gravity.
But they felt something.
Yeah, a great feeling of comfort, deep comfort. And perceptions still happen, just not through physical organs, seeing without eyes, hearing without ears, that kind of thing.
It sounds like a very different mode of being.
Completely. They frame it as a resting state, and the awareness itself felt like waking up from a long sleep, suggesting maybe there was a period of non-awareness or deeper rest before that.
Okay, so you're in this state, aware, comfortable, no words, feeling excited. What's the next step? How do you get from there to, well, here? To embodiment.
Well, right. The transition, they describe being summoned, not like an order, but more like a polite, comforting feeling drawing them somewhere else.
Summoned. Okay. Towards what?
Towards another non-place, as they call it. It seems like our usual spatial language just doesn't quite fit these experiences.
Yeah, you can feel the limits of language here.
Yeah, totally. They mentioned passing through an opening in some kind of separation. Again, not something visually perceived, just an awareness of crossing a boundary.
And on the other side of this opening,
they found themselves in a space that was, quote, filled with all these little sparkles.
Sparkles?
Yeah, apparently these sparkles were active and dynamic, moving around. And as they got closer, they realized the sparkles existed in pairs.
Pairs of sparkles? What did they think those were?
Their interpretation was that these paired sparkles represented couples, people, potential parents for the life to come.
Ah, okay. So this leads to the big moment then.
This is the absolute core of it, according to the source. The whole purpose of being in that space filled with paired sparkles was to choose your parents, to choose a life.
Whoa. Okay. That's huge. You choose the life you're going to live.
That's the assertion. And because of that conscious choice made before birth, the source argues you fundamentally can't bitch about whatever happens later.
Right. Because you picked it.
Exactly. Everything that unfolds, the good, the bad, the challenges, it's all tied back to that original intended choice.
But wait, if we all supposedly chose our lives, why don't we remember doing it? That seems like a pretty major thing to forget.
Good question. The source attributes this forgetting to the trauma of being born, of becoming embodied. That whole process apparently wipes the slate clean, memory-wise.
Okay. And what about the source's own choice? Did they remember that specifically?
Yes. And they felt their choice was different this time around. They had this awareness while making the choice that they'd done this whole process repetitiously, perhaps millions of times before.
Millions. Wow.
Yeah. So this time, they felt they knew the ropes better, had more awareness, and could make a wiser choice. They even speculate that maybe their current life, which they describe as difficult, was chosen specifically to burn off accumulated karma.
A conscious karmic cleanup operation.
Sort of, yeah. And they also mentioned sensing a guiding giant presence during all this, which they took to be like the supreme consciousness overseeing the process.
How did they think their own experience compared to, say, most other people choosing a life?
They drew a contrast. They felt they were making a very conscious, almost informed choice because of this deep history. But they believe most people are relatively new to the process.
New souls, kind of.
Maybe, or just less developed awareness at that stage. So they think most people choose more based on happenstance, or just grab the option that karma presents most readily, choosing instantly without the same level of conscious deliberation.
Was there an option to not choose? To just stay in that pre-birth state?
Apparently, yes. The option existed to just go back to the long sleep, to skip embodiment for that cycle. But the source said they were just too excited, too full of anticipation for the life ahead.
And that excitement carried through.
They say it did, yeah. That feeling of anticipation became a thread running through their current life.
Okay, this whole idea of choosing lives, doing it potentially millions of times, it really implies the self is much bigger than just one lifetime, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's a key takeaway. The source explicitly states that the human being is actually too large to fit entirely into the physical body we occupy.
Too large? How does that work?
Well, they break the being down into distinct parts. There's the doer, that's the fraction of us that's actually in the body, making decisions, experiencing things day to day.
Okay, the part we usually think of as us.
Pretty much. Then there's the knower and the thinker. Three main components.
Doer, knower, thinker. How do they interact?
So the knower operates through intuition. It connects to this vast database of past experience from all those other lives.
Okay.
The thinker is responsible for, well, thinking, cogitation, analysis, forming conclusions within the current life.
Right.
And the doer takes action. It makes choices based on input from both the knower's intuition and the thinker's reasoning.
And those actions, they have consequences.
Big time. According to this model, the doer's decisions are what feed the karmic engine. They generate the stream of events, the circumstances we encounter in life. Every little choice contributes.
It's like a feedback loop.
Exactly. They also mention a specific book that they feel describes these mechanisms really accurately.
Oh, yeah.
A book called Thinking and Destiny by Harold Purcell from back in the 1950s. They reckon it's about 96% accurate on this stuff, but warned it's incredibly dense, like over 1,000 pages long.
Wow. Okay. A serious read.
So we have the doer, the knower, the thinker, but you mentioned the doer is just a fraction of the being.
That's right. According to the source, even the doer part isn't fully present in the body. The doer itself is apparently sliced up into 12 bits.
12, that number again, like the zodiac or hours on a clock.
Exactly. The source points to those patterns, suggesting 12 is some kind of fundamental structure in existence.
So if the doer is in 12 bits, where are the other 11?
Only one of those 12 bits, just 112th of the doer, is actually in a physical body at any given time. The other 11 are described as being in that long sleep state we talked about earlier, or maybe in some kind of processing state. They're cycling through, taking turns, experiencing embodied lives over vast stretches of time.
Are these 12 bits like completely separate individuals then, or?
That's a really important clarification they make. No, they're not separate. They are all intrinsically part of the same larger being.
Okay.
They share one common soul. Think of them like facets of the same gem, nearly identical expressions of one continuous consciousness, just experiencing life sequentially or maybe even somewhat simultaneously from a higher perspective.
Right. And this model explains, what about past life memories?
Exactly. This is how the source explains those cases, particularly children, maybe in India or Tibet, who have these incredibly detailed memories of a previous life in another village, maybe as someone else. The explanation isn't necessarily that the child is that exact same person reincarnated. It might be one of the other 11 portions of that same doer being born into a new life.
I see. So it's like accessing a shared family history, almost.
Pretty much. Because all the memories, all the experiences, the awareness gained from any life, lived by any of those 12 portions, it's all stored centrally. It's accessible across the entire being.
Because they share that common soul.
Yes. The soul acts like the central hard drive, the shared memory bank for all 12 parts.
That really expands the definition of self, doesn't it? Not just one life, but this collective experiencing existence through 12 different windows over potentially immense timescales.
Totally redefines it. And the source claims to have some, let's say, experiential proof for these ideas.
From near-death experiences, right? NDEs.
Yes, they mentioned having 3 NDEs.
Right.
The third one, apparently when they were 65, seems to have provided some really direct validation for this whole structure.
Okay, what happened during that third NDE?
Well, they described leaving their body, see it on the operating table below, felt kind of disgusted with its condition, actually. And again, despite having no physical eyes, their perception was incredibly sharp. Intense clarity. They could see details like stuff inside closed drawers in the room.
Even clearer than the pre-birth state.
It sounds like it, yeah. And crucially, during this NDE, they became directly aware of the doer part of their being.
How did they perceive it?
As 11 interacting spheres. They realized they were one of those spheres temporarily separate, and then they sort of rejoined the collective doer.
Wow. And was the communication the same as before birth? That wordless understanding?
This is where it got really interesting. Now, in this NDE state, they found they could actually interact with the knower, the thinker, and the collective doer using words, verbally.
Verbally, that is different.
A huge difference. And this ability to communicate led to a kind of negotiation about whether or not to return to the body.
A negotiation with other parts of themselves.
Sounds like it. Initially, they didn't want to go back. They felt done, tired, especially after dealing with illness for years.
Understandable.
But the other parts, the knower, thinker, doer collective, started making offers to persuade them.
Offers? Like what?
First offer was meaningful work. They refused that one. Second offer was something related to their martial arts background, a chance involving battle or conflict. They considered it, but felt the body just wasn't up to it.
Right. Makes sense.
But the third offer, that was the one. It was the chance to know love in the later years of your life.
Yeah.
That promise was the deciding factor. They accepted and returned to the body.
And they see echoes of these promises playing out now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They connect their current intense physical training daily practice with katana, armed defense directly to preparing for some kind of upcoming battle.
Yeah, a literal battle.
They seem to think so.
Yeah.
They described it as global, possibly involving, and this is where it gets really out there, space aliens or space alien technology.
Right.
That was the sense they got when the offer was made.
Okay. Wow.
And the other promise about love, they connect that to their current relationship, the connection with Heidi. They see it as the fulfillment of that NDE bargain.
So they place immense trust in those experiences.
Completely.
Yeah.
They explicitly said they trust the information and the promises received at that life-death barrier more than they trust everyday earthly reality. It's more real to them. Okay, let's circle back to the soul then, and how this shared intuition works across those 12 parts. How did they describe the soul itself?
Right. The soul in this model isn't physical matter. It's described as an energy container. In fact, the source sees all matter as fundamentally an illusion that's actually created by the soul.
An energy container.
Yeah.
Creating reality.
Kind of. And it also acts as a conduit, a communication channel from the greater being, that supreme consciousness. They pictured it as a perpetually spinning energy cup.
And this one soul serves all 12 parts of the doer.
Yes, that's crucial. It's the common element, the shared operating system, if you like, for all 12 portions of that larger being. It's a much more permanent than any single physical life.
So when one bit of the doer finishes its life,
one of the other 11 can then essentially move into or occupy that same soul for its next turn at embodiment. The soul persists.
Got it. So how does the knower tap into this soul for intuition? How does that mechanism work?
Okay, so the soul is the repository. It holds all the experiences, the conclusions drawn, the awareness gained from every lifetime lived by any of the 12 parts.
That's a lot of data.
An unimaginable amount, probably. Now, during that long sleep period between lives, which the source connects to our concept of heaven, seeing it as a comfortable state of reliving and processing the past life's karma, during that processing, the experiences are rendered down. That's the term they use.
Rendered down, like distilled.
Exactly. They used a pretty intense metaphor like melting in flame.
Whoa.
Yeah, and they actually suggest that's where our concept of hell might come from. Not that it's actual torture, but it represents the intensity of processing raw experience into pure understanding.
So the experiences get processed, rendered down into what?
Into intuition. Pure knowledge, pure awareness extracted from the events. This rendered wisdom forms a thin layer around a central core, which they liken to layers forming around a pearl. Each lifetime adds another layer.
A pearl of wisdom built over lifetimes.
Pretty much. And the knower part of the being has instant access to this entire database, all those layers of intuition from potentially millions of lives lived by all 12 portions.
Instant access to everything.
That's the idea. And how does it get delivered to the doer who's busy living this life? Through qualia.
Qualia, what's that in this context?
They described qualia as the universe, or maybe the greater being, providing specific, aiding perceptions in a critical moment. A sudden gut feeling, noticing something specific you wouldn't normally see, a flash of insight. It's instant knowledge delivered non-verbally to help the doer make a choice, especially when things are happening fast.
So the knower provides the wisdom from the past. What about the thinker's role in all this?
The thinker's job in this life is vital for the future. By thinking, analyzing, and drawing conclusions about current experiences, the thinker creates the raw material, the awareness that will later be rendered down into a new layer of intuition during the next long sleep.
Ah, so the thinker prepares the data for the next cycle.
Exactly. They create the conditions for this life's lessons to become future intuitive wisdom for the whole being.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive has really taken us on a journey, hasn't it? From consciously choosing your life before you're even born.
Right, which is already a massive concept to grapple with.
To this idea of a self that's split into multiple parts, maybe 12 parts, living sequential lives, but sharing a soul, sharing memories.
Accessing this vast layered intuition built up over potentially millions of years.
And having these ideas potentially confirmed or illuminated through near-death experiences, including direct negotiation with other parts of oneself.
It's an incredibly intricate, unique framework. And it's important to remember this is one individual's account, right? Based on their very specific experiences, their interpretations, their study.
Absolutely. A deeply personal cosmology shared while, literally packing up house and getting ready for whatever comes next.
Yeah, which is a poignant detail. A reminder that these big questions about life, death, and purpose can surface right alongside the most mundane tasks, especially when guided by a lifetime of thinking about it and maybe fueled by promises from the edge of existence.
It definitely leaves you with things to mull over. And maybe this is the final thought for you, the listener, to consider. If you take the source's perspective seriously, just for a moment, if you really did consciously choose the life you're living right now with all its specific circumstances, what does that imply about the challenges you're facing?
Right. How might looking at your current struggles or even joys through that lens of chosen purpose or maybe karma processing, how might that change how you feel about them or how you act?
It's a perspective shift, isn't it? Definitely something to think about. And hey, if you're feeling really adventurous, want to tackle the source material they mentioned.
Thinking and Destiny.
Yeah, apparently it lays out a lot of this, but be warned, it sounds like a serious undertaking, over 1,000 pages of dense metaphysical exploration.
A deep dive for the truly committed.
Indeed. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.